So good morning. I'm from an organisation called Community Catalysts, and myself and Clinton. Do you want to say good morning, Clinton?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Clinton Ferguson, and I'm the chair of Think Local, Act Personal.
I'm liking the orange, Clinton. It suits you. It's yeah, good and cheerful. I like it. So Clinton and I are hosting the session today, and the focus, I'm hoping you're in the right room. So the focus is on a place called home when thinking about people who have to move out of their original home or choose to move out of their original home. So we're thinking about people who are perhaps living in supported settings, perhaps supported accommodation or residential care, nursing care, moving into places that are not their original home in order to get the support that they need. And we're exploring further some of the discussion that was started this morning with the lovely video from Jane and the presentations from Isaac and Anna on the Social Care Future inquiry. We've got this piece of work is in two parts. So this morning we're going to start by discussing the issues and the challenges, and then this afternoon we reconvene. Hopefully we'll get you back if the links work, and then we're going to be starting to think about actions, solutions, and positive ways forward. So that's the aim, and we've got some lunch in the middle, I think. So we're joined by three keynote listeners, which is a really nice and very different way of thinking about. Normally, if you go to conferences or events, you have keynote speakers who get up on their platforms and deliver presentations with slides and so on. But today we've got three really strong expert folks in the room who have expertise and experience to share and help inform the discussion that we're going to have as a group. But we're not going to be asking them to do big presentations. And Clinton's going to get people to introduce themselves in a second. So we've got Sean Lockwood, who used to be the CEO of my organisation, Community Catalysts, but has recently retired, at least in theory. Anyway, I'll let her talk more about that in a minute. We've got Lucy Series, an academic from Cardiff University, and we've got Ewan King from Social Care Institute for Excellence. So we've got some really strong expertise in the room from yourselves and from those keynote listeners. So I'm going to hand over to Clinton, and he's going to get people to introduce themselves some more, and then we're going to start some discussion about the issues.
Thanks, Angela. If I could ask each keynote listener to introduce themselves and share their thoughts on two questions. The first question is, what are the challenges we face and where are the problems and gaps? And then second question is, where are the opportunities to make a difference and move towards an equal life for all? So I'd like to invite Lucy Series first to give us 6 minutes on your thoughts on those two questions.
Sorry to interrupt, but I've just realised I missed something, Lucy, before you. Can I ask people to use the chat? If you've got any thoughts or questions or anything as Clinton and the three keynote listeners are speaking, if you've got just anything you want to say, use the chat. And then at the end of their little, not presentations, but at the end of them talking, we'll use the chat to have a bit of a discussion. Sorry, I forgot to say that, Clinton and Lucy.
No problem. So can I invite Lucy to speak to the two questions? Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for all having me here today. This has already been just such an interesting event, and I'm really grateful to the opportunity to hear what everybody's got to say. So my name's Lucy Series. I I'm currently based in a law school, which is a funny place for me to have ended up because I'm not a lawyer. When I was mostly in my late teens and 20s, I worked in a whole range of health and social care settings, including supported living, care services, services that were supposed to support families and parents with learning disabilities, but which didn't. Intentional communities, and they spanned this whole range from places that really did a pretty good job, not perfect, but a pretty good job of letting people live in their own homes with the support they wanted, how they wanted it, to live the kinds of messy, complicated, ordinary lives that most people just take for granted. Right through to services that were just extraordinarily restrictive, which used very, very high levels of restraint and chemical sedation and so on. And in between that, there were kinds of places that were aspiring to be kind of quite cutesy and cuddly, but which were actually also quite restrictive. So I can remember this intentional community that I will not name on here. And it had this like lovely branding, which is why I'd gone to work for them for free. But when you got there, people were just like not even allowed to choose what they ate for breakfast or how they spent their day. And I actually ended up leaving because there was a kind of revolution from some, I'm going to call them carers, because if I say what their label was, it'd be really obvious what the service was. Some people went on a person-centered planning course and tried to bring the training back into this particular community, and it caused so much upheaval amongst the old guard, the idea that people should be allowed to just have these really basic choices, that they actually they stole our car keys and our credit cards, so we had to leave. So that's where I came from, and when I was on this journey through working through support services, I was like, oh my goodness, this is just not what I was expecting. I thought that when I transitioned from supporting children to supporting adults, that's what I'd be doing, supporting adults, but instead it was more of the same, but even worse. It was almost like you reached 18 and all that happened was the people who had power over you transitioned from your mum and dad to support services, and you weren't being supported to live adult lives. And there was this act that came in at the time called the Mental Capacity Act, which back in the kind of mid to late 2000s seemed like it was just going to change everything, because it said it was going to give people these rights to make these decisions. And my research ever since then has been about trying to understand why that hasn't really worked. And so I have just written a book, which is part one of a two-part story, trying to explain why it hasn't worked. And I suppose there are two factors, and this is what I think is driving what I call the institutional treadmill. So the institutional treadmill is this journey that we've been on since the 1950s of trying to get people out of institutions into homes, and we create these services that we slap a label on called homes, and that began with what Nye Bevan called sunshine hotels, or what we now call care homes, and then it became supported living, and we build these services and we put this label of homes on them, and yet over time, perhaps it doesn't even take very long, they start to look more and more like institutions, and we think, right, we need a different model, and we build a different model, and that the institution just keeps creeping back in, or we keep getting sucked back into our institutional past. And in the book that I've just written, I think there are lots of reasons, there are lots of power sources driving this institutional treadmill. Some of it is around culture and the cultures of staff, and like maybe we can look at training, and Social Care Future are looking at the kind of way, the language we use, cues different ways of supporting people. And culture is really important, but the two issues that I really want to highlight as challenges are about care economics and about mental capacity law. So to take care economics first, part of the issue is that there's a lack of funding, undeniably so. Okay, but there has been times where there has been more funding. There are services that are better funded. I'm thinking ATUs, for example, are very well funded, but they're still massively institutional. And there are all kinds of reasons for this, but some of it is to do with bed-based services are a more reliable income generator in the private sector. And you can read about this if you go and look at care market reports, which are quite hard to get a hold of. They cost thousands of pounds, but you can actually visit them in the British Library. They talk about places where people are sticky, where people can't get out, and places where people have no choice over who supports them as being really the best models to generate profit in this market. So lack of choice is a really integral part of the care industry's profit model. And then even if you gave people these kind of quasi choices, the economics of care requires economies of scale. And you achieve economies of scale by herding people together, which is what we call segregation or congregate living, and then imposing on them a regimented regime, which really cuts back on the number of staff you need, the quality of staffing that you need, and the amount of choice that people get over when they're supported, who supports them when and how. So in all kinds of ways, care economics powers this institutional treadmill, and that's very, very hard to unpick, okay? So that shapes the kind of choices that are in theory available to a person, though, where they could live, who could potentially support them and how. But those choices are already really constrained. You know, we're talking not planting a tree in a forest, but in quite a little plant pot. But even within that, the choices that could in theory be available to a person can be really constrained because of mental capacity law. And when the Capacity Act came in the 2000s, I thought it was just going to absolutely blow the roof off things, and it hasn't. And part of the reason it hasn't is because actually the people it puts in the driving seat are still the professionals and the care providers, not the person themselves. They still exercise a huge amount of power to determine whether someone has capacity, to determine their best interests. And it does so in such a way that I think people in this country think that that's the ordinary normal course of things, that of course professionals should be in charge of these things, and of course this is the best way of doing things. It's quite a kind of slick piece of PR, to be honest. But actually there's this Disability Rights Convention that really tries to blow that way of thinking up, and it tries to put the individual in the driving seat through processes called supported living decision making. We've got a great history of supported decision making in this country, but actually with all kinds of people who are here. But actually, I think a lot of that is a kind of forgotten history, and I don't think the law gives it as much backing as it could. So the possibilities, I think, are, firstly, we need to look at supported decision making, look at how we can give that better recognition, better legal backing. The other set of possibilities, I mean, short of revolution, I'm not sure what we can do to blow up care economics. I'm not enough of a Marxist to have an answer to this. But what I would say is we need to be really, really cautious about the way that profit sucks away choices through driving economies of scale and congregate living. And I think Social Care Future are offering new ways to think about care that could potentially build the political capital we need to make the really massive changes that are needed at governmental level. That's all I've got to say for now.
Thank you for that, Lucy. Can I invite Sian Lockwood to answer the two questions? Sian, do you need me to say the two questions again, or
no? I've thought about them, and thank you very much, Clinton. And it's lovely to see you, and I like your orange too. I'm for those of you who don't know me, I am retired just in July from my role as CEO with Community Catalysts. Angela and I share a very, very long career together, don't we, Angela? I've got about 30 years of experience in working in different ways with people in local communities to help them set up enterprises that make money, that help other people in their communities. These are all really small. I started with a model called Shared Lives, where families were recruited to offer a home and share a life with people who need a bit of support and wanted that kind of support. And then moved on to found Comcat's Community Catalysts in 2009, just about, with Angela as a co-founder. I suppose the point of that is we started, this all started with a project from the Department of Health to find ways to support really small enterprises that are offering choice for people. Those enterprises were all closing, having to merge, had been taken over by bigger organizations at the time. And many of those early enterprises that we work with were actually really tiny care homes. And quite a lot of our work, this was in Kent, which is one of the pilot areas, was helping the local authority understand the value of these really, really tiny care homes, because as Lucy says, there was a huge drive towards reducing the number of transactions that local authorities had and forcing merger. There was also a real dislike of the care home model. And I think our view of the very tiny care homes was they were able, not universally, but they were able to offer real choice and flexibility for some people. So that's my kind of work background. I've also got a personal recent background, which is kind of driving my retirement, in that my mum came to live with me at the end of 2019. She was living in her own home until then. She had developed dementia, and it was becoming increasingly hard for her to stay at home, supported by the sort of domiciliary care, which is 4 visits a day, and I was supporting her at a distance, and I couldn't find any of the wonderful micro enterprises that can be really helpful in that situation, as Jane showed. So Mum came to live with me, and I was able, just because this was now my patch, to find some great people to come and help. And she stayed with me until a few months before she died. The reason she moved away is just we couldn't keep her safe. And eventually I found a care home which was run by a charity, but not one of the big for-profits, that was 2 minutes away from me, and they were wonderful, and she really liked it. And then COVID came. COVID came, and there was a complete lockdown, and for 3 months I couldn't see or talk to my mum, and she deteriorated during that time. She couldn't really use. She found the phone difficult. She found FaceTime even more confusing. And so when we did finally connect again, and the care home were really good in trying to help us stay connected, she had become very much deeper into her dementia journey. But the care home did all they could to keep family contact going, to let me visit when it was safe to do that. And Mum died there, and it was actually a good death. She was surrounded by love from the people in the care home, and we were able to be with her towards that end. So that's kind of influencing my some of my thinking. So just to move on to the main challenges, well, clearly I think people want different things, particularly as they come towards the end of their life. And I think we just need to recognise that people are not uniform, and there needs to be much more diversity on offer. If people can't or don't want to stay in their own home, staying in your own home can be a lonely business for some people. Regulation can make it incredibly difficult to offer diversity, particularly for organisations and people offering accommodation with support. Shared Lives has its own regulatory regime, which we fought for when I was the CEO of Shared Lives Plus before Alex Fox. And that regulatory regime allows the Shared Lives families to be families. But a lot of the smaller care homes don't have that luxury, and they don't have that tailored regulation. So regulation is a big problem, and it often inadvertently regulates against diversity. Local authority commissioning, as Lucy says, there was a huge trend towards merger, towards reducing transaction costs in local authorities and to drive down costs. And we lost a lot of diverse services at that point. And many local authorities still have that mindset. There's also, I think, as well as commissioning barriers in local authorities, there is a cultural barrier against diversity among not necessarily the senior managers, but the people who advise people and control the individual purse strings. So if you take shared lives, which is an established model, is everywhere, it is still a very small option. And some of the reasons it's a very small option is that the people advising find the model uncomfortable. And there's a real fear among frontline commissioners in particular, I think, of blame, because if they advise people who are wanting something a little bit more different, and there's a fear of, that goes wrong, and they will be blamed. So I think those are the challenges, the main challenges I see in terms of opportunities to make a difference. I think, commissioners clearly potentially have a big role in encouraging diversity and in spending money differently and supporting community options such as community microenterprise, to enable people to have real choice of lots and lots of different ways in which they can be supported. And in order for that, commissioners need to really get a sense of the diversity of the people they're supporting, because there is a bit of a one size fits all in the minds of some commissioners, and I think a prejudice against some kinds of living. So I think, for example, retirement communities tend to be the prerogative of people who are self-funding, because it's really difficult to get public money to support that kind of living, and yet that is a way of living that some people choose and enjoy. So there's a big push. It came up in the chat as well, a big push to that Social Care Futures needs to make around changing commissioning mindset, commissioning culture, as well as perhaps working with Care Quality Commission and other regulators to influence the way in which they think about regulation. And that's a big ask. I've tried, we've worked with CQC ourselves for many years, haven't we, Angela? And that isn't easy to change mindsets. I think there might be a quick win, which is around also a challenge to providers. And I know we've got some great provider representatives in the room here today, but providers to consider working with smaller community-led services and supports to help them change their culture and the experience of the people that they're supporting. And I'm thinking in particular of something quite a long time ago with a time bank in Bromley, where a local small care home had joined the time bank, and that completely transformed the experience of the people living there, because they were being asked to give as well as receiving. And that was a really interesting way of changing the experience of people living in more traditional provision. And so I'm going to stop now, I think. But I'm really interested in the conversation.
Thank you, Sian, for that. Could I invite Ewan King now?
Thank you. Thank you, Clinton. It's really a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm in giving my reflections, which I'll do briefly. I'm going to draw upon some work that I've been involved in, Sky's been involved in over the last year, which is the Commission on the Future Role of Housing with Care and Support. And it was a big piece of work. We involved over 1,500 people. We had a co-production panel involved as well, and we spoke to a very wide range of experts across the sector. And the purpose of this commission was to look at the future of housing with care and support, and really develop a bit of a plan for influencing government, but also influencing how things operate at the local level. And it looked at all forms of of housing with care and support, so care homes, supported living, extra care, as it's sometimes called, shared lives, home share. So it looked at the whole host of different models. So the key challenges that we came across, I mean, firstly, people told us in the survey that they didn't know much about what was available. That was the first thing that we came across. Lack of information, lack of knowledge about what was available, how to access different types of accommodation was a real problem. People had fears about safety in relation to particularly care homes, but also other settings. And although people put independence as the number one thing that they wanted, they were really concerned that many of the options available didn't really afford them independence and didn't keep them in their local communities close to the people that they love and the people that they know. So there was a lot of concern really about what was available. We found that there was a lack of choice and availability. So there are actually local authorities in England that don't have a single extra care offer, for example. There are local authorities that have very little to offer on shared lives. So there's huge variation we found between different parts of the country. We found that commissioning was, what, to use the jargon, disjointed. So you have the NHS doing something different from the local authority, something different from housing providers. No one's working together to bring it all together and have a clear plan for the future. We found there's a lack of co-production, in the sense that people weren't really involved in what was being planned locally, what type of design people wanted with their accommodation, how to access that accommodation, what kind of care and support would be available. None of that was really designed with the person at the heart of the decision-making process. So that was a real issue. And then there's a real problem around equalities. We found that certain communities, ethnic minority communities, LGBTQ communities were not having the same access to person-centered options as others. So we've got real problems there. In terms of opportunities, we did come across some very good practice, really exciting, innovative examples, shared lives being one of them, home share, co-living opportunities and options. We found some amazing examples of extra care where you had self-managing care and support teams working hand in glove with the local people living in those places to design the type of care that they wanted. So plenty of good examples, but unfortunately they haven't really been allowed to grow to their potential. So they're still sort of in pockets around the country, which is a problem. I think the opportunity of co-production has been underexploited, really. I think we could really have excellent involvement of local people in how all forms of accommodation are developed in the future, right through the whole process. And it can be a 5-year process to develop new buildings, but right through that process, getting people involved in at every stage would really help and improve the quality and innovation that's inherent in these accommodation options. And then I think we've heard a lot from Social Care Future about this, which is how do we make a positive case for change? There's a huge number of people who will want better housing options in the future, and how do we create a positive momentum, a positive voice around the really good stuff that's out there and how we have more of that really good stuff. So less of talking about care homes in crisis, more about what's really positive and could be really inspiring places for people to live in the future. So if we can kind of keep going with that movement, and we have an opportunity right now with the white paper. White paper is not a done deal, it's not set in stone, it is a set of proposals. And I think this group of people and everyone on the call today could really influence what the government does next on housing with care and support. So keep that going, really. That's enough from me, I think.
Thank you very much for that, Ewan. Any thoughts from in the chat room? Angela, is there anything coming up in the chat room?
There's some really good stuff in the chat. Can I ask Laura just to share a little bit about commissioning, if you don't mind unmuting, Laura, if you're still here?
Hello, hi Angela. Hi everyone. Yeah, so I think yes, some amazing points and some just spot on points. So we work with a whole host of different commissioners across the country. I was just thinking then, Greater Manchester being fantastic at the moment, so really giving people choice, not one size fits all, and we can work with them, work with the people we support, and develop something really bespoke and just what meets the person's needs. Whereas when in other areas, we've been recently told we're not commissioning any models of support apart from extra care and filling voids. And interestingly enough, that local authority was mentioned in the white paper as being a creative local authority in terms of packages of support, which isn't really our experience. So it's a challenge, isn't it? It's a real challenge. So I think you said, Angela, it's about us pushing back on them conversations as well, and where it's tricky. It is tricky, and we do have them conversations. But as a provider, you're in a difficult position sometimes, because you can see there's people that are coming, whether they're coming out of hospitals or wherever, and we want to support people, and we want to, support them to have an amazing life. But if a commissioner is so fixed on we're not commissioning anything but extra care, it's also like, where do you go with that? It's a challenge.
Thank you, Laura. And my kind of challenge back was, I think sometimes providers need to push back on that, to not bid. But the flip side of that is, if the good providers don't bid, then what happens is, it's the people who get the work are the ones who are not challenging. So there is a that's a double-edged sword, I think.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Carly, you were talking about the difference between England and Wales. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, no, I work across right on the border, so I cover kind of up towards the Wirral, and then in North Wales, Wrexham sort of side as well. And I've just seen, very different. So they kind of use the same models around, like, a flat model under one building, but actually very, very different attitudes. It's around, making sure the support hours are right for people in one area. It's making sure that actually they're not about cutting costs. It's not about moving people into places and then going, let's cut their package of support. It's about going, no, they still need that package of support in their own environment. So I've just seen a very difference across working, and different attitudes really around making sure support is right for the person.
And do you think that's England, Wales, or do you think that's just a coincidence that one of the authorities you're talking about is in England and the other one is in Wales?
I don't know. I think CIW and Social Care Wales lead around choice. That's a big part of their, of what they want. They want providers to be looking at outcomes for people, and I think they do realise that that's not possible if you're not providing that support hours as well. So, we can only do those things if we've got the right support hours for someone. The big part of, especially in North Wales, like this transformation team is around enabling people and widening people's circles. So I think, I do feel that it is a Wales thing. It is good on that side.
Okay. So a shout out to Wales then. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we're supposed to be having a good chat about the chat, Clinton, but I think, conscious of the fact that we started late, I am thinking that we perhaps ought to move into our groups now. I think Trisha's going to move us into our groups. And I'm thinking maybe 20 minutes, Trisha, rather than half an hour.
Yeah, definitely. So can I just say a little bit about the groups? So the idea is that we're going to put you in breakout group rooms, and there should be about 6 of you in each room. So enough, the smaller groups, so you've got time to chat. What I'd like you to do in your breakout rooms, and I think there's a couple of options with this for every breakout room. I think there's a couple of people who could do this. Could you nominate or volunteer in each of the small groups somebody to take some notes? Okay, so I'm not asking you to write essays, but just to capture the key points that you're talking about. You're thinking about the same questions that our listeners have shared with you. So essentially, what are the challenges? Where are the problems and the gaps? And where are the opportunities? So think challenges, think opportunities. Be really strict with yourself and only do 10 minutes on challenges, and make sure you've got the other second 10 minutes is actually on opportunity, because I know what we're like as human beings. We do like to focus on the problems, don't we? So I want to make sure we find out what the problems are and agree them, but also to make sure you think about what some of the opportunities are. A couple of minutes before the end, and I'll do a reminder for you, if the note taker could ask people to agree what their top 3 things are. So up to 3 problems, up to 3 opportunities. Okay. And then when you come back, I'm going to get you to do a Jamboard. So I'm going to share the link in the chat now, and you'll see it. So essentially, the people who have been the note takers will get to write their top 3 things on the Jamboard. I will explain how to do it when you get back. I'm sure lots of you have done it already though. So does that make sense? You'll go into a breakout room. First thing you do is get someone to be a note taker, and then capture the essence of the conversation, but be prepared to feed back and put onto the board when we get back the top 3 challenges, up to 3, and the top 3 opportunities. Is that all right? So I will float around the rooms. I'm going to open them now, if I can get my mouse to work. And I think there's a couple of people I've not allocated yet, but here we go. Getting everybody back in. Fantastic. You guys were just came out very well behaved. You didn't wait for your minute to be up, did you? How are you doing, Darren? Nice to see you.
Fine.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We certainly had some great discussions in our room. I hope you did the same. Tricia, I think you're going to tell everybody.
Walk us through the next bit. Absolutely. So, did everybody manage to record some key points? Yes, there's some nods. Good. Okay, fair enough. So let's just see if this works then. So I've put the link to the Jamboard again in the link. So please, those of you who need to write on it, it's only those of you who need to write on it need to click on that link. Everybody else is going to see it because I'm going to share it now. So I am going to share my screen and Safari. Right, so scribbling, that's a good start. So people who are going to write, if you haven't done it before, if you look down the left-hand side here, go 4 down, there's a sticky note. You click on it and it comes up with a sticky note and then you just write. And then save, and when you press save, look at that. It just pops up on the screen. So, and then I can move it around. So when you click on the link, oh, don't move that. Whoever's doing that, here we go, we'll leave that one, thank you. So when you click on the link, use the link to write on. You won't be able to type on the board that I'm sharing, okay? So I'm going to delete my note. I'm going to delete that bit of, I'm going to try and move that back. There we go. So we've got this one. If you can move, if you look, those of you who need to write, at the top here, this is the first screen. So this is the challenges and problems. And if you go to the next screen, it will be the opportunities. Okay, so those of you who need to write, you toggle yourselves on your board between the two. Okay, so I'll go back to the challenges. Oh my goodness me, sorry, that's my window cleaner's arrived and terrified the cat who's just jumped out. It's all right, Tilly, it's all right. There we go. Gosh, that was a loud bang. Right, so I can see someone started. Anybody, if you've got an issue, then let me know. But I'm just going to move them around. Fantastic. Trying to get rid of that scribble. I don't know why I can't do that. Oh, maybe I need to. There we go. Right. Right, so this is where we just chat amongst ourselves, and I move these cards around, and we'll see what the sorts of things that people are saying. So
There's some very interesting things going on here. We're not all square pegs.
absolutely.
That's what I want to know. I don't think any of us square pegs. I think we're all wiggly shaped pegs. We need wiggly shaped holes.
Right, we just need to.
Commissioners don't listen. It's all about the budget. I love it. I know in my session, we had a big discussion about and mechanistic commissioning. And then and Christine said something about mechanistic providing, which I thought was really, do you want to share that, Christine, while everybody's writing?
And let's try and, can we do it in the plainest English we possibly can? Because it's really important ideas, and some of the words are quite complicated, aren't they, around that? So I understand what you're saying, but let's see if we can break that down into the plainest English we possibly can. If we, that would be great.
I don't know if Christine's still here, is she?
Are you there, Christine?
Maybe not. Maybe gone off.
Right. So we've got things coming through like commissioners' lack of information for people, so they're not aware what's out there. I can certainly attest that certainly that's my family experience in my wider family, that my brother who used to be a businessman didn't know the options available for his mother-in-law, and just assumed that because a social worker had told him that she had to go into a home, because that was what would happen. And then I told her about personal budget and direct payments, but he didn't know about it. So I think that's a really good example.
Lack of digital equipment for those who can't. Yeah. Lots of people are not online.
Yeah.
They have gadgets to get online. And that can
I
be
like
a real challenge.
This idea about no room for being spontaneous. I'm in the middle of that issue at the moment in my life, where I'm trying to explain that that my daughter's support isn't exactly the same every week. That's not how she lives her life. And yet that's what the commissioner wants, is to know exactly what the budget's been spent on every single week, and just for a week. And I said I could do it maybe over a month, but I can't tell you on a weekly basis what it looks like, because that's not how we live life.
But people are asking about the word commissioner and what that means, Tricia. So I think the people in councils who have the money to pay for social care, they develop contracts with provider organisations, with charities, with organisations that are doing this for money, and they give money to those provider organisations.
They buy stuff.
They buy, so they say to them, if we pay you, will you set up a care home? If we pay you, will you run some supported living for us? If we pay you, will you run a day centre? And those people who do the paying are called commissioners. So a lot of the comments on this board are about how the people who are doing the buying services maybe don't always maybe don't always do it off well. I think that would be fair to say. Maybe they're just buying the same thing all the time. Buying care homes, for example, maybe big care homes, rather than thinking about what else they might be able to buy with the money that they've got. That's a very simple way of putting it. I think if anybody was here who had that job, they would be saying, hang on a minute, it's not easy for us. But that's just to explain all the comments on the board that are about commissioning.
So there's lots of stuff there. Lack of choice. This is an interesting one. Do commissioners even know about the people they're commissioning for? So do they know do they understand the real human beings behind the stuff they're buying things for? There are lots of people who could do with a bit of support and a bit of advice, but are not on their radar. I think that's really interesting, yeah. The stuff about social care and housing and health being not joined up properly, that's always a thing, isn't it? And the power, that's really interesting. The power sits with particular people. and the people who draw on social care are not at the table. That's a really good point. I'm going to click onto the next one, onto the positive. Oh, there we go. So, suggestions for opportunities. Now, at the moment, we've only got 2. Is that because you're still just busy doing it? People who are typing, let me know. Tell me, are you just getting you onto the opportunities now?
Share your comment, Sean, while everybody's typing.
Thank you.
If Sheila doesn't mind, and member of our group is 98. She feels invisible to both health and social care. She has no contact. She's a wonderful 98, very independent, lives at home, gets about with a mobility scooter, has a daughter who supports her, who's supportive, but she has no contact from either health or social care, and it's to the extent that she was passed over for the vaccinations and had to initiate those herself. So I think there's something about people who are amazing and strong and well who just are ignored.
Thank you, Sam. And thank
Brilliant.
you. Wonderful. Clinton?
Angela, just on that point, that is what was mentioned in the report by Think Local Act Personal around personalisation in Black and Asian minority ethnic communities. And they were saying we're hidden in plain sight, but we needed to be visible. So, those are some of the things that commissioners will need to think about, how they make sure people are on their radar. And that's part of the equalities element that Ewan was talking about when he mentioned earlier. So co-production is really important to play in local decision making.
Lovely, thank you. By co-production, you mean working with the folks who use social care services, finding out what they want, finding out from them what it should look like, and then making health services and care be what people want it to be, rather than what the system decides it should be. Yeah,
and I include providers in co-production as well, with people who draw on care and support and the workforce. So we can find what that truth looks like, because everyone will have a different piece of the truth from their perspective.
Lovely, thank you, Clinton. There's a couple of people writing things about the Care Quality Commissions. The Care Quality Commission are the people who go in and check whether care services are doing a good job. The inspectors, I suppose they get called by the television. And there's a couple of people making comments about those inspectors, and somebody saying the Care Quality Commission's reports bear no relation to the quality of the service. The Care Quality Commission might say that this is a really good or an outstanding care home. Can somebody from that group share? It bears no resemblance.
It was me that said that, Angela. Sean, and I think it relates to the search I made for care homes for Mum when we realised that she was going to need care, and she had a little bit of an experience in what was said by all health and all CQ, Care Quality Commission, was the best place, and it was a complete nightmare for her. It was very slick, it was very functional, it said all the right things, and she tried it for a night, where she was going to stay for a week, but I sprung her after 2 nights because it was just absolutely the wrong place. And there were places like that who was said to be excellent that would really, I wouldn't put my chickens in them. So that was what I was saying.
Thank you. I think that's really.
Gary had his hand up. Did you still have something you wanted to say, Gary?
I just going to say, when you're actually getting commissioners, they need to think about people from ethnic minorities, refugees, and also LGBT groups.
Absolutely, it's making sure you think, like, that goes back to the whole not one size doesn't fit all. We're not, you know, we aren't with square pegs and round holes and all sorts. There's I think there's a really good point there about what we learned during the pandemic, certainly, because we learned a lot about how you can do things more creatively, and we stopped being so worried about double checking and treble checking every single penny that was getting spent, because people had other things they had to be doing. So I think that's something to be thinking about definitely as well, isn't there? Again, we've got digital opportunities, community-based solutions. So put the funding outside for the minute and use the money in a different way. So I think that's a big thing about local authorities taking a leap of faith. And part of the thing about co-production, the bit about the co-production word that we often forget is the production bit of it. Because co-production isn't just listening to people. Co-production is people, citizens actually providing some support. So actually local communities looking at setting up and providing support. So that feels really important to me as well. And I really like this one, housing providers being included and engaged in possibilities for the future, because the housing bit of the picture is really, really important, isn't it? If you're looking at, you know, the fabric of where you live, as well as the support you get if it's not your original home, is really, really important, isn't it? So,
and somebody in our group, Trisha, Christine again, I think she's back now, I saw her in the chat, was talking about the opportunities of the new legislation that's coming, the new laws that are coming on health and social care. Christine, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
And then we must break for lunch, because otherwise we have a very short lunch otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be super brief then, but just to say that the health and care bill is obviously going through, well, it's in the House of Lords at the moment. I had a second reading last week, and my organisation is Centre for the Understanding of Sustainable Prosperity, and we're working with the all-party parliamentary group on limits to growth to try and get some amendments put into the health and care bill to try and kind of rein in some of the very, very heavily financialised providers of care homes, like residential and nursing homes. And, you know, because particularly I'm interviewing a lot of carers at the moment who are talking obviously about the impacts that
this could end up going back to Parliament in the new year.
Yeah, it will. And so we've got, I can drop a link in the chat if it's helpful, but basically we've put together a policy brief that tries to propose some amendments to the bill that will, just stop these big companies from extracting huge amounts of profit that they do at the moment at the expense of quality of care and working conditions in the sector.
Yeah. And it was quite controversial the way the government did things on that day, though, when he called them away from a charity dinner or something, which was organised by the party, a fundraiser.
I haven't heard about that one.
No, that's
Darren, thank you.
You always have ear to the ground, Darren. You always know the stuff.
Yeah, but I think so that's very, very interesting. And I think Christine's put a link to that in the chat for me, because I asked her just as our room closed. So if anybody is interested in that, I was certainly very interested. Okay.
Brilliant.
Lunch, I think. You?
Yes, because we're going to be back by 1:30, so we need to give you some time to have a lunch. So we're going to be tied. These obviously the boards will be one of the things we'll share afterwards with the boards, and we're going to start them. We'll start the afternoon session by sharing what you've said. So brilliant, Angela. It might be that there's a couple of things that you want to kind of pull out of the boards to feedback at the afternoon session, if that's all right, beginning of the afternoon session. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody.